unprecedented and genre-defining. Final Fantasy XVI's demo mesmerized both longtime fans and newcomers alike. Upon release, I eagerly dived into the highly anticipated Final Fantasy XVI on the PlayStation 5. Building upon the awe-inspiring foundation laid by its demo, the full game exceeded all expectations. In this installment of Should a Dad Play, we embark on a captivating journey through Final Fantasy XVI to provide a review from a dad's point of view on whether this is a game you should pick up or not. Before I begin with this review, I'm going to toss a bunch of franchise names around, like Naruto, Dragon Ball, Game of Thrones, Kingdom Hearts, Devil May Cry, and Attack on Titan. If you like any or all of those franchises, you're likely going to see either some resemblance within this game, or you're just going to enjoy the game overall. Final Fantasy XVI offers some very cinematic action pieces with story and lore that will keep you entangled for over 40 hours. With introductions out of the way, let's begin with the review of the game with just that, the story. Final Fantasy XVI is set in a world called Valisthea, which is divided by 6 nations, all which hold power through crystals and dominance. Dominants are human hosts to icons. If you've watched Naruto, think of dominants as Shinchuriki, while icons as the tailed beasts. You're playing as Clive, the protagonist of this story, and you're quickly caught in a slew of issues, from family betrayal to even darker toned messages throughout the game of slavery. Yes, this game focuses on the Branded, which are none other than those that can conduct magic without the use of crystals. These special humans are treated as slaves, and is another big point of the story throughout the game. With the general idea of what the story of the game covers, without hitting any spoilers at all, Final Fantasy XVI does an impressive job of entangling you in almost every single one of the story points within the first 2 hours of gameplay. In fact, if you've played the demo, odds are you want to know more about the game, and throughout the entirety of that game, the demo portion still remains a very big, crucial focus point, which carries ripple effects throughout the course of your over 40 hours of gameplay. Final Fantasy XVI obviously is very heavy in cutscenes, but they're a treat to watch. At times, I wish I could just sit there and watch the whole game this way. The voice acting, the audio design, it's all very top-notch and top quality. Watching Clive battle it out and duking it out with icons or against icons or with other people, it just comes together in a way that is very captivating to the eye. And if you like any of the other series or franchises we mentioned above, the action set pieces are going to also captivate you. But let's go ahead and move from the story over to the gameplay and controls. And we're doing something a little bit different here. We're ditching the script. Now, you'll be able to read the whole review in a script form in the blog, but here we're going to just kind of use the word of mouth approach, because I think that does this game more justice. So, in terms of gameplay and controls, I know there's a lot of back and forth within the community for Final Fantasy specifically on whether or not this is a true Final Fantasy. And I want to say it is. It really is. I've played a few Final Fantasies throughout my lifetime, really, and I don't see this as being any different than any other Final Fantasy at its core. Now, you look at the approach that they brought with the mechanics, it is different. And I think Final Fantasy has been changing throughout the years. So I don't think the argument of this is not a Final Fantasy is accurate. I very much so believe this is more of a Final Fantasy than any other Final Fantasy, if that makes sense. So let's talk about gameplay and controls for this game. This is by far the furthest Final Fantasy, I think, of any other one that there may be. This is more similar to Kingdom Hearts than it is to Final Fantasy, in my opinion. But guess what? It's basically the same thing, right? So let's go ahead and break this down. You're playing a more action approached game here. This is not a turn-based game. This is not that hybrid turn-based combat where it's kind of like an action RP or action turn-based. None of that. This is a full-on action-based game. If you've played Kingdom Hearts, if you've played Devil May Cry, you've played more so loosely what the combat is going to be like in Final Fantasy XVI. Now, as you make your way through the story, we're not trying to put any spoilers here, you will get access to other icon abilities. Therefore, you will be able to kind of shift abilities on the fly. If you've played Kingdom Hearts 2, think of it like changing your forms. You know, you have like your wisdom and your valor and your final form and all that stuff. Similar to that, but more on the fly. Whereas in Kingdom Hearts, you kind of had to build up to that, kind of like a limit break type ability, which you still have that here in Final Fantasy. But you can kind of on the fly just kind of swap in and out of abilities, which grants you different types of elements to kind of work with. And all of this comes together in a kind of what I can explain kind of like a fighting game form. And I'll explain. You have a training room in Final Fantasy 16. If you go to your hideaway, there's a training room that you can go ahead and practice combos. You can chain moves, chain abilities, and you can practice and mix and match to see what works best for you. Now, this is one of the reasons why I believe this is more of a Final Fantasy than any other, because just like you would in any other turn-based Final Fantasy, you would have to, you know, kind of build your character out to make sure that they kind of hit an archetype that you were aiming for. Well, with Final Fantasy 16, even though it's a more action-based approach, you can kind of do the same thing. You can go ahead, mix and match your abilities and your elements and whatnot, and you can go to the training room and see if it works out or not. And you actually have to put in the effort, if you will. You kind of have to have that real time button mapping or idea, your patterns, or what exactly you want to do, how to do it, similar to fighting games. Now, that's not to say that it will push away anybody that is not good at fighting games, because there are some accessibility features in Final Fantasy 16 where you will auto chain combos, or you can potentially dodge automatically or have a prompt to dodge. Throughout my gameplay, I actually just left the dodge prompt up. That was the only accessibility feature I had, just because I feel like it reminded me a lot of, and this is not a one-for-one comparison, but it reminded me a lot of Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, where if you dodge correctly, you have like a little window to attack. That was the only reason I left it there, just because of the similarity there. I kind of like that a lot. But these all take place in all these accessibility features. You can just equip an item. It's kind of like a pendant, a charm that you put onto your character, and you can only have 3 at a time. So there is some balance there for those that do need a little bit more of a helping hand. So as a father, as a dad, my time is limited. So if I were to put the game down, say for example, for 5 hours, 3 days, you don't know how long you're going to put the game down. It makes it easier to pick the game back up, because you just put some pendants on. By the time you get the swing of things again, you can take those pendants back off and you're back into the game. It does a really good job of keeping you in the game, really, even if you put the game down for an extended period of time, which again, as a dad, is a very big plus. The game also features an active lore. I think that's what they called it, active lore. So again, going a little bit back, this is part of the gameplay and that story. If at any point in time you forgot what that character does, says, is, or what part of the realm they kind of support, you can click on this active lore and you kind of get caught back up to speed with what's going on in the game. And again, this is immensely positive thing for me as a dad. I can't count the number of times I had to put the game down for over a few days, only to come back and just not know exactly where I was at. But, enabling this active lore, just going back in and looking at things, I was caught right back in instantly. And also, if I put the game down, I forgot my combos or whatnot, or I had just got a new icon and didn't know how to kind of work with it, all I needed to do was put a pendant on, get the accessibility, and then take it back off, and then I was back into the swing of things. It just makes things a lot more accessible. Not easier, because the game doesn't get easier because you have these things. It's just more accessible. And again, I think that is a very welcome approach for all players alike. New Final Fantasy players, old Final Fantasy players, it don't matter. Everyone gets a plus there. But now, let's go ahead and break down the sound. The sound is great. I think the music is phenomenal. The battles are that much more impactful because of the music. The sound effects, the flames, the electricity, just everything in general. The sound is great. I played this game on regular TV speakers. I played this game on actual speakers, and I played this game on my Pulse 3D wireless headset for the PlayStation. And I love how it sounded on the headset. It sounded great on the TV as well. Obviously, there's level gaps of how good it sounds based on wherever you're listening. But obviously, by far, if you're playing on your headset, on the Pulse headset specifically, it's a 10 out of 10 for me there. But now let's go ahead and talk about the graphics, because this was another issue that a lot of people had, both with graphics and performance with this game on PlayStation 5. I played the entirety of my game without doing any preventive maintenance leading up to the release of the game. I've cleaned out my PlayStation in the past. I think the last time I cleaned out my PlayStation was in January. So I played this game through its entirety. Not one issue in terms of overheating. I know that was a concern for a lot of the players. No overheating. If your PlayStation is stuck inside of a cupboard or something like that, well, that would make sense. There's no airflow. But if you have your PlayStation where it's supposed to be, in a place that does have access to airflow, if you regularly clean it, or if it's just relatively clean, you should not have an issue with any sort of overheating. Now, I will say this. There was another concern with frame rate drops. I played the entirety of this game in fidelity mode. There was a performance option. I enabled it just to see how it looked. I didn't see the value of it, only because I think this game just looks too good to not play in fidelity mode, and that's preference. Now, with that being said, in performance, I didn't have any frame rate drops. In fidelity, I did have a bit of frame rate drops during a specific cutscene, which I obviously can't mention. It would be very much so spoiler, but there was just few frame rate drops, but it wasn't enough to put you away from the overall experience of the game. And honestly, blink and you missed it type thing. So again, not necessarily a bad thing, not necessarily a great thing either, given the day and age that we're in with video games. But this game is also very physically or graphically demanding, if you will. So it doesn't surprise me, but I do think that there is room for improvement there in the future. But overall, gorgeous game. I cannot state that enough. These cutscenes when you're having these icon battles, these boss fights, the vibrant colors, it's over the top, and it's very much so something that you would want to watch in a very, 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 very high quality anime, or if you're watching like Dragon Ball and like Dragon Ball Super or anything like that, where they go all out. You kind of get that at all times here with Final Fantasy. So now let's wrap things up here with replayability and fun, right? Is this game replayable? It's a very long commitment, but I do think it is. I think there's enough customization here, and there's another argument with RPG elements. There's enough customization here in this game for you to replay this game and have fun with it. This game is extremely fun to play as is. The combat is phenomenal, really. There is a lot of concern with the fact that there's not enough customization, but there really is. You have an immense skill tree to play with. You could always refund your points and just reallocate your skill tree points. So again, I don't want to state that the other reviewers didn't kind of do the game justice, but I do think there is a lot of customization options here, a lot of accessibility options here. And in terms of replayability, you unlock a Final Fantasy mode, which is your New Game Plus mode, after the fact. And if you're trying to be, get that platinum trophy, you kind of need to do it. So I think replayability is great as well. I think overall, Final Fantasy XVI is a phenomenal game. It is definitely a must-play game. It is going to hit that 9 out of 10 for me. It's a must-play game. It just falls short. It's not perfect. It definitely is not a perfect Final Fantasy game, but I think it is very near to where they want to go in terms of action Final Fantasies. I wouldn't be surprised if the next Final Fantasy goes back to turn-based just to kind of get all audiences on board. But whatever the next Final Fantasy game is that does go through this action route, and I'm talking about mainline, not like a remake or anything like that, but the next mainline Final Fantasy game that goes the action route like this, I'm gonna be very, very, very interested to see how they approach it. Again, Final Fantasy 16 for the PlayStation 5 is getting a 9 out of 10. It is classified as a must-play. With Dad's XP, my name is Paul Irizarry. Catch you guys next time.